Welcome to the SSI Orbit podcast, a forum where we explore the ever-growing ecosystems of self-sovereign identity. And I'm your host, Mathieu Glaude. In today's podcast, I talk with Adrian Doerk. Adrian is one of the best advocates of self-sovereign identity that there is out there. He describes himself as being on a quest to explore decentralized solutions to counter threatening business practices. So Adrian's focused on providing basic education about self-sovereign identity via the SSI Ambassador Twitter account. He's also quite busy building a strong community for the LISSI initiative, which has an SSI wallet focused on internationalization and has been made available in 12 languages. Adrian's also involved with the IDUnion organization, where they're creating an open ecosystem for decentralized identity management that's oriented towards the European values and regulations. So in this conversation, Adrian and I discuss how he got into SSI. We talk about his work on LISSI and IDUnion. We discuss how important contextualization and internationalization are for user experience designs of SSI wallets. We talk about using SSI for crypto. We also talk about how SSI could be used for bridging the gap between institutions and crypto, and we cover much more. Without further ado, here's the conversation with Adrian. Enjoy. Okay, we are live. Thank you, Adrian, for doing this with me today.
Hello, Mathieu. It's a pleasure.
So, Adrian, do you mind just giving a brief introduction on yourself and just talking a little bit of how you got into self-sovereign identity?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Adrian. I'm 27. I'm originally from Germany, and I got a technical background and a business degree. But how I went, first heard about self-sovereign identity is as an intern at HTC Exodus in Taiwan, where I did my apprenticeship, my internship. And there, Phil Chen actually told me about the emerging concept of self-sovereign identity, and funny enough, also about surveillance capitalism. And I got really interested in both topics, and then went further to specialize really on the whole topic of self-sovereign identity back roughly 2 years ago. Since then, a lot of things have happened, and I kind of converted my YouTube channel or my personal educational channel from a rather crypto wallet focused channel to only focusing on a topic of self-sovereign identity. And that's more or less how the SSI Ambassador channel was born. And for now, also doing public relations and the whole communication topics lead at IDUnion. And I'm also doing marketing and sales at LISSI.
Awesome. Yeah, I think so. The whole topic of surveillance capitalism is a reason why a lot of the folks in our communities got into decentralized technologies, whether it's crypto wallets, like you talked about crypto, or even just decentralized identity. So when you first got into the SSI space, let's say, did you spend time on specific projects like before you got into LISSI and IDUnion? I think you spent some time at Sovereign. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. So basically, back then it was probably the easiest choice to get really your hands dirty in the topic. And I just joined the business of SSI working group at Sovereign. And I was really fascinated with all the different developments going on. I really felt included into the whole community at Sovereign, and it was a really great starting point to get familiar with all the topics and actually contributing to some papers and all that stuff.
So while you were doing that, were you part of the Main Incubator at that time? Does that kind of cross similar timelines?
No. Back then, the Main Incubator, it was already researching the topic, but it was more or less in a stealth mode. And not necessarily publicly talking about it. And back then I was still working in Taiwan. So I didn't actually know that Main Incubator is actually researching the topic back then.
Got it. And then when you got into the Main Incubator, it was more from a blockchain or crypto standpoint?
They actually approached me directly for the topic of SSI, and I might want to say a couple of words about the Main Incubator here. So basically, the Main Incubator is the research and development unit of the Commerce Bank. We are a 100% subsidiary, and we do also venture capital for small companies in the finance sector, or which can be used and integrated in a commerce bank, to also prototyping, which also Lycia and the whole topic of decentralized identity fits right into. And we also do community activities like our quantum circle or between the towers. So we take a look into a lot of different topics, and the whole topic of digital identity was one which was then explored roughly 3 to 4 years ago. And there was one summit which they actually introduced the ongoing developments, which was the blockchain summit at Deutsche Bahn, so the biggest German railway company. And obviously, I was super interested and booked directly my ticket to go there in Frankfurt and listen. And I wrote an article about it, about LISSI, without being a part of a team, because I was just interested in a topic, and that's part of like what I did at SSI Ambassador. And then obviously we continued the conversation, and at some point we decided it would make sense to collaborate and further push this topic together.
That's great. And so I guess for folks that aren't familiar with LISSI, LISSI is an output of the Main Incubator. Do you mind just explaining a little more what LISSI is?
So at Main Incubator, we took a deeper look into, okay, how can we jumpstart the whole topic of self-sovereign identity? And we decided, okay, let's first we took a look in which frameworks exists. Obviously, for example, Hyperledger India and Hyperledger Areas, which we currently build on, is just one out of many. And back then there were a lot of other, like the Ethereum ERC 725, for example, which nobody talks about right now. But like, there are like a lot of different frameworks around there. And so basically, they took a research and took a little deep dive in that, and then collaborated with players who were actually chosen the same frameworks, technological frameworks, and then said, okay, let's guys, we have the same research approach and the same topic we want to get experience on. So why not collaborate? Where obviously in digital identity, it makes sense to keep not only in your own silo, but actually approach other players. And back then was, for example, the Federal Printing Office of Germany, the Bundesdruckerei, as well as, for example, Bosch and Isatos AG, which is obviously a big name in the scene as well, and some other players. And that's how the first research initiative then was jump-started. And back then we were looking for a name, and we found the acronym, Let's Initiate Self-Sovereign Identity, in short, LISSI. So that's how LISSI was born. And we're really lucky, because then the innovation competition of the German government came up. It's called Showcase Secure Digital Identities, or Schaufenster Digitale Identitäten in German. And basically the government said, okay, hey, we have a problem, or rather we need a solution for digital identities, which works on international standards, is interoperable, and just enables people to control their own identity without being exposed to all the surveillance going on. And obviously there we applied with our concepts, and we said, okay, LISSI is more a software thing, where we actually developed software together. And so we said, okay, we need an ecosystem where actually LISSI can live on, and this ecosystem enables LISSI, for example, to then build on it. And the ecosystem then which we applied to is IDUnion, and we were part of the first phase of the innovation competition. And we now applied for the second phase, and we hope that everything goes smooth, so we can start in 3 weeks, which is April 2021, to start for 3 full years of funding with 30 players from the public and private sector in IDUnion. So it went pretty fast, pretty big, or went pretty big, pretty fast. So we're really looking forward to that. And this is pretty amazing what's going on right now.
Yeah. Honestly, from my perspective here in Canada, just looking at what's happening within the German ecosystem overall, and I had Andre from Isatis on the podcast a couple of podcast episodes ago, and it's quite incredible to see the traction that's coming from both the private sector and the public sector in Germany and just the investment that is going into strong digital identities and decentralized identities in particular. And I want to get back to IDUnion in a minute, but I just wanted to touch on one of the things you had mentioned within LISSI. Like one of the objectives of LISSI is all around usability, right? When you talked about internationalization of SSI wallets. So I'm quite interested for someone that has spent more time thinking about this internationalization, let's call it the challenge. There's one thing to just label your wallet and the buttons in the wallet and different static content in the wallet in a specific language. And I have seen that LISSI supports 12 different languages, which is quite incredible. But how do you look at internationalization beyond just flipping content? Because it seems that content is one thing, but then when you actually get down into exchanging credentials in the different protocols, and credential schemas are one thing, attributes are another thing. Kind of what are your thoughts on really drilling down the internationalization all the way down to these levels?
Okay. First, I want to give some more context of what products we have, or like what solutions do we offer at LISSI. So basically, we have one product, the LISSI Wallet for end consumers, which they can use on their smartphone as an app to store digital credentials and to interact with third parties. And the other software which we offer is for big institutions. So it's an on-premise solution which they can host in their own environment in order to establish connections, send credentials, or ask for them. And concerning the internationalization of all the products, it's obviously not easy in terms of talking about digital identity, because it highly depends on the context at hand. For example, we are used to have green buttons which kind of show where we're supposed to press the button, because green is associated with something which works or which you're supposed to do, instead of, for example, red, which then signals danger, for example. But that's obviously our perspective from a Western perspective, which then can totally change for other cultures. This is just one out of many examples, giving, for example, the color here. This continues with the uses of genders, the left to right or right to left writing, or the information density of languages, as well as the usage of tenses and so on. So there are a lot of challenges which we actually faced, for example, translating our wallet into 12 languages. And we are actually engaged in the conversation with the Decentralized Identity Foundation, short DIF. So we have a product manager call, which I'm honored to co-organize. And then we talk about all these different product challenges which we face as product managers, in terms of how do we design the user experience, how can we make sure that the information within the credential, so the attributes, are actually understandable in other contexts and other languages as well. For example, I get a good grade at university. It's a 1, which is the best grade in Germany, right? But then go maybe to a whole different country with a different grading system, and nobody actually knows what 1 means. And some other regions maybe use letters for that. So this is information which we need to make transmittable and understandable, the semantics of it from one context to another. So we see really that there are a lot of challenges ahead, but I think solvable challenges which we really have the foundation now to build on and to further go into the details.
Got it. So there's different levels of this stuff too. So like a lot of the contextualization you're talking about has to just do with just UX flows in general to be able to have it supported, not only by different languages, but different cultures. So this is even like ourselves being in Canada, we have 2 national languages, English and French. So we do have kind of some of these challenges, but when you're really talking about not necessarily a specific culture or just a Western culture, I understand what you're saying. There's a lot more that goes into it just in terms of the contextualization. So at the Decentralized Identity Foundation, you guys are focused on UX flows. Are there similar considerations that are taken for other stuff, like creating backup mechanisms and stuff like that? Like, do you mind talking a little more about the work that's going on there?
So it's funny that you mentioned the backup mechanism, because that's exactly what we're talking right now. So we have like a call every second week on Wednesday. And for now, we discussed all the different backup mechanisms. For example, the classic one with the mnemonic seeds, the 12 words, which you write down, which are probably most people familiar with if you have been in blockchain and cryptocurrencies. This is one option, obviously, for SSI as well. But we also know that this is not the most user-friendly, and there are obviously big drawbacks with the solution. So we have to think about other ways. For example, social key recovery or device-based recovery, and all of these mechanisms, they have certain advantages, but also certain drawbacks. So now we take a deeper look into what are the drawbacks, how can we integrate them, what are the best solutions for maybe companies or end consumers, and even an end consumers, what is the best solution for my grandmother or my mother, who might not be so well around these digital devices. So we have to find solutions for everybody, and not only, for example, the highly decentralized maximalism crowd who really want to store all the data on their devices or have everything in control, but also the solutions which are easy to use, where there's might be a third party which is then acts as a guardian in order to restore all the information. So I think it's not the only solution or the only backup solution which we'll have in the end, but we have to make sure that we offer different solutions for different target audiences, and consider their needs and then find a suitable solution for it.
Yeah, a lot of the problems apply directly to crypto as well, right? Like to just having that self-sovereignty, whether it's over your identity data, or whether it's just around your digital credentials, or if it's your digital native assets, like different crypto assets. You have all the power in the world, but it comes down to just managing your keys. And so it's a lot of similarities between the two worlds there for sure. Jumping back now, so we talked about LISSI a bit and some of the advancements that kind of LISSI is helping contribute to in terms of contextualization and internationalization and backups and mechanisms and stuff like that with the Decentralized Identity Foundation. But LISSI, am I correct to say LISSI is more of an international play, whereas IDUnion is more specific to the German market or potentially the EU?
Yes, and so far, LISSI is really like we just want to make sure that this is a product or like that institutions from all around the world can use it. So it has a quite international focus. In regards to IDUnion, while we are very German driven for now and have this German funding, we have a clear European focus. So we see that there needs to be a European solution. And I don't say that IDUnion will be the solution. It is just one way of doing things. And we will see how things develop with the European blockchain service infrastructure and other European SSI initiatives from other member states. But the solution which we go to is that we say, okay, in the end, it's all about governance, right? Who controls that? Who can say what are the rules and so on? And there should not be a single entity who says or dictates the rules. And that way, we need to find a form of governance which can be influenced by all the different stakeholders involved. So very democratic approach. And we went with a European cooperative. So that's what we're planning to in terms of founding that legal entity as the governance body to control the network, which then represents the interests of the sum of all members. And we took long to really get into the nitty-gritty, the details of all the different aspects which you need to take into consideration signing a governance framework. And we talked to lawyers and all the different stakeholders involved to really make sure that we have a solid framework. And we're about to finalize that in terms of the documents, the legal documents as an output. And we're really looking forward to making that accessible to a wider audience, and then actually founding the European cooperative to make sure that we have the network then can run in a productive state.
Got it. And then I think we're seeing a little bit of a trend of different public identity utilities pop out a little throughout the world that just take more consideration about localization and maybe better alignment to different data privacy laws. Is that something that kind of was in the conversation before starting IDUnion? Was, hey, like with the data privacy laws that, by the way, that we have to follow in Europe, which is just world leading and innovative data privacy laws like the GDPR. Are these big considerations for public identity utilities, or just blockchain projects in general in Germany?
I would say that especially like there are two regulations which are very important. One which you already mentioned, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and the other one is the eIDAS, so the Electronic Identification and Authorization Trust Services regulation. And both regulations are really having a big impact, not only on the European Union, but also on a broader regulatory landscape on an international context. And obviously, it's very important to make sure that whatever you're building is really conformative with the regulations at hand. So this was a big part of the decision to have a European governance infrastructure there. But obviously, for example, another reason why we decided to go for a European cooperative is that we wanted to have a level playing field for all different companies or public stakeholders in the European Union, to say, okay, this is not like a German foundation, which then is really close to German law and makes it even creates a little entry barrier for then, for example, for companies or public stakeholders from other member states to participate. But we wanted to say, okay, there should be a level playing field for all of them. And that's the reason why we went for this quite specialized European cooperative. And I think there are like 35 out there. So this is not something common. It's something which is quite new and hasn't been explored and be leveraged for now.
Yeah, and I know you wrote about that in a document that you gave into the Trust over IP's Utility Foundry Working Group. So there's more information in there if folks are interested in learning about that. And I know you write and are active on social media about all of this stuff as well. So just switching gears a little bit, you did an interview with Tim Bauma, I think last year. And Tim is really a thought leader, not only in the Canadian market, as he's part of the Canadian federal government, but just internationally as well. And so there was a research question that you asked him about kind of concerning the growth factors of SSI solutions in Europe. And the way Tim explained it, which is quite similar to, I think, the way that we've approached just decentralized technology like crypto and blockchain is general, is that end users don't really understand the plumbing. They don't really understand it. They probably shouldn't understand it either, but the growth is going to come from the plumbing. It's going to come from the standards. It's going to come from some technology. But it's not stuff that the users really need to be aware about. And so you have a Twitter account, SSI Ambassador, and a presence online where you're really pushing education for adoption of self-sovereign identity. What kind of made you get into really doing this type of thing through SSI Ambassador, and kind of what is some of the stuff that you're preaching and that's gaining a lot of traction?
There was quite a lot of different questions. Maybe I would just begin with the SSI Ambassador. So basically, I'm actually not sure what is like the future plan for the channel. For now, the thing what I'm doing is mainly providing content on Twitter, for example, which is mainly educational, and then point or like give people who who wrote or like have an opinion about SSI, then like quote them and say, hey, that's what he's saying, that's what she is saying, and give everybody kind of a voice within their community, without trying to be biased, which is always very difficult. But that's what I'm trying to just like make sure that you have like one point where you can just follow, and you're sure to get different perspectives on SSI, maybe some critical ones as well. And so you don't have to follow like 2 or 3 or 400 different people to get like a sneak peek into SSI, what's going on, right? So that's what I'm doing, helping people there. And there's no business model behind it. It's just like a private endeavor, which I do. And also write articles. Where I just try to kind of make the same, to summarize different information which is going on in the community, quote people, and point to resources and sources which are available. And that was obviously part of that as well with Tim Bauma, and because that's what they developed, the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework. It's pretty impressive, and they took it quite far in terms of how to approach that, all from a technology agnostic perspective. And I think we can all learn a lot from the Canadian approach, because in the end we have so many different aspects which we need to consider, that it's really difficult to follow everything what's going on. And I hope I can make it a little bit easier for people to find relevant resources.
I could say you definitely do. You make it very easy. I think for someone just getting into the space, it's a little a little tough at times. There's so much stuff going on, right? Even for us that are in the space, like just seeing all the different initiatives and working groups and standards and all the different things that are being worked on, it's crazy, right? There's so much stuff that is happening. There's so much action. There's so much momentum, but just keeping up with stuff is a challenge in its own. So I think for someone just getting into the space, just like getting into the crypto space, it's kind of, you realize like, oh, what have I gotten into here? So, if we take that standpoint, then if I look at you, SSI Ambassador, explaining or just giving resources to people that are interested, if what Tim said is true, of like people aren't going to really understand what's happening, but they do need to understand the value of decentralization to some extent, right? So like, how would you, for example, explain decentralized identifiers to a beginner without going into too much detail about any technology or standards?
So basically, identifier is something which connects you to a certain system. A classic identifier is a telephone number or an email or everything which is unique or might be unique and is associated to you as a person. And a lot of systems, this identifier is given to you or at least managed by a central authority. Which is the case for emails or telephone numbers. And the ideas for a decentralized identifier is that you can just create your own identifier, give it to somebody and say, hey, if you want to talk to me, then this use this identifier, and you're sure that you will end up in my wallet, and then we can talk.
Right. And then the other part to that is, once we have that secure, private, direct two-way connection between two entities, now we're able to exchange verifiable information. That's where, I guess, the verifiable credential conversation comes in.
Yeah. So once you establish an encrypted private peer-to-peer connection with help of the decentralized identifier, then obviously you can use this communication channel to exchange all sorts of information. It doesn't actually need to be a verified source of information like a verified credential, but can also be self-attested, or it can also be like a chat, whatever, or PDF document. So the possibilities are quite endless.
For sure. And one of the possibilities to use this stuff that I've been excited about, which is kind of one of the reasons that led me personally into the self-sovereign identity space, is the need to have verifiable data while maintaining the privacy by design and the consent-driven interactions, but the need to have this verifiable data in a decentralized manner that supports decentralized systems. So if I'm building a decentralized supply chain system, for example, I need to meet certain compliance requirements. I need to meet certain access and rule provisioning requirements if I'm going to onboard someone to this ecosystem solution for the supply chain. So it's one thing of saying, yeah, this is a very interesting model where through this type of solution, we could create tons of transparency and traceability in a certain supply chain that at the end of the day will benefit the end user on many different ways. But to actually make that work, you need potentially, to make it work in the world of government, you need to adhere to certain rules and regulations. And that's where I got quite excited about, hey, look at this model with decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. Now, all of a sudden, this type of thing looks very complementary to these decentralized systems, whether it's a supply chain or whether it's crypto, whether it's a decentralized browser like Brave. And so is for yourself, having been kind of on both sides of the fence, do you see that marriage between both being quite exciting?
I think it's really the connection between both, as you said, and on one side you have like the whole decentralization crowd with Ethereum maximalists and Bitcoin maximalists and so on. And the other higher side, you have the institutions, which are quite conservative and don't want to actually commit to like things they're not sure about. So they're rather risk averse. And to bring them together is obviously the challenge which we have here. And I think that the infrastructure in terms of the standardization formats which we have with verified credential DIDs, but also the protocols with DITCOM, for example. These are really good base layers to bring them together to say, okay, this is common infrastructure which we have standardized on an international level, and now we can use it to do whatever, right? So in terms of use cases, we have almost no limit in terms of what we actually can do with it. Let it be natural person, a legal entity, or an IoT device. You can use it for all of that. So to in the end actually get it on the road, the rubber on the road, and start with it. That's actually right now the time to really explore it and make different pilots possible. And there we see to really have the interest of all the different public and private stakeholders. That's really amazing to see that they are willing to commit resources, not only financially, but also to really contribute to, for example, open source repositories and so on. This is something where we see that they have clearly the need and the vision to make it possible to actually have decentralized identities and to enable really individuals to make sure that they can use it for different use cases.
I love that because you definitely on one side, like you said, you have the maximalists where I laughed one of your tweets recently where you said people tweeting about basically the price of, quote, insert any cryptocurrency here doesn't provide any value. So you have these people on one side that are just maximalists, or just people trying to pump and not really adding value like that on one side. But on the other side, there's real interest in crypto. There's real interest in government issued currencies. There's real interest in NFTs that we're seeing now, where there's a lot of pumping happening there too. So I really like kind of how you look at it like that, where you have the common infrastructure that's able to bring both sides together. And so do you think that if that is successful, like all these projects that are happening, call it if they're NFTs or whatever we're talking about, do you think these will gain adoption at the same time as SSI gaining adoption? It seems like there's the opportunity for them to fuel each other.
Yeah, I would say so as well. They're complementary. So, but it highly depends on what you want to use it. For example, if you want to use NFT to really solve digital identity, then let's be honest, it's not going to be happen, because NFTs are not built with privacy on this design aspects. Basically, we saw that with a lot of people who put their Ethereum name system tag on Twitter, for example. And you can just take a look on what they're doing, which transactions they're doing, what NFTs they bought, and so on. That's not a desirable goal, right? That's not something we want. And people tend to just use it and then in the end say, oh, damn it, now everybody on the world can see what are transactions I do, when I bought a certain object, and so on. And that's not something, obviously, which we want. So it highly depends on what you're going to use it for. And obviously there is a niche or a demand for certain use cases. When it comes, for example, to NFTs or other cryptocurrency applications with the combination of digital identity. But it's kind of difficult to really say for now where use case is going to lie or going to be, because I'm not so deep in a whole NFT topic anymore. I have some of I don't know what's called crypto Pokemon, so I forgot the name, and like some Axie Infinity stuff and so on. Like obviously I experimented with that as well a couple of years ago, but I haven't been able to deep dive in that topic recently, just to all different stuff going on.
I'm with you on that too. I think I was deep in the crypto world a few years ago. Still have very good visibility, but when the whole the whole yield farming stuff was happening last year, and then now just the craziness around NFTs, it's like conceptually you understand what's going on, but it's just pure craziness. so it's just the type of thing that these things every year there seems to be a new hyped up thing within the whole crypto world. But yeah. I guess sorry, go ahead, Adrian.
One more statement about these kind of crypto projects, because I see some projects which actually want to solve this kind of digital identity, and they have a token, and having a token is not the problem, but having a token which you can invest and speculate on, which is connected to digital identity, that's a problem, because we don't want to have an ecosystem where people then have like a financial incentive to comment below, yeah, awesome, super thing, or yeah, it's not good and whatsoever, because they either have a maybe like a stake on like some portfolio investment, or they're short selling the token. So I personally really try to avoid any project which has a speculative token when it comes to digital identity.
And if you think about Ethereum, though, like there's a lot of different digital identity projects happening on Ethereum. Like Uport is one of the earlier ones. You mentioned earlier, just there are different ERCs, like the 725 one for digital identity smart contracts. Do you look at that the same way then? Like if you use something like Ethereum as a public utility for your identity, there is speculation happening on Ethereum, right?
I mean, that's something different again, because Ethereum is obviously not built to solve digital identity. It's so much more, and digital identity is just a small part of it. And we see, for example, the ceramic network and so on. They're actually trying to solve the whole topic of digital identity, but I think it's more about whole topic of reputation instead of digital identity. And there's always like this kind of line which you need to draw, is when do you say about this particular project there's something positive or negative because you invested in it. So yeah, it's really difficult to draw the line at some point. I'm quite not sure where to draw it in Ethereum, but I've recently saw that at some other DLT projects which have the token. Yeah, that's just something which I think that doesn't make any sense, right? Because to have like a far more bots who just spam some comments on Twitter because they have the hashtag of their token, and now I say, yeah, that's awesome. That's just like, it doesn't bring us anywhere. It's just making things worse.
I think a lot of the times people come from the wrong side of things, where they're coming from the solution standpoint rather than the problem side of things. So it's kind of like, hey, we have the solution to everything, and that's decentralization, and let's try to fit in everything to here. So I think that's just a common kind of problem we see over and over again. But you touched upon reputation there. What are your thoughts on just reputation for identity overall? I'd be quite curious.
I mean, trust is something which we build over time, right? And that's basically reputation. And in the end, if you have a new partner which you want to do business with, then you want to know, can I trust this person? Which basically asks for the question: Is this has this person or business a reputation which gives me a reason to trust it and actually engage in a business activity? And so basically you can build this reputation over time through records, and obviously then for example something Ethereum is might be a good solution for it, that you say, okay, I can prove that I have 3 years of constant updates to a smart contract as me as a business, and we also do, I don't know, audits or whatsoever. And then you say, okay, all these different points accumulate and then build my reputation on the system. And then you can use this reputation to engage into other conversation. So I think that's very valuable to have something like that. And I think we still need to kind of talk about that in a whole SSI topic, because we don't really talk about that too much. We talk about verified credentials and selective disclosure and so on. But this whole reputation, which you have as a track record, which you can show, which then might be, for example, the sum of all your credentials. But this is still something which, in my opinion, we need to explore as a community.
And it potentially doesn't necessarily need to be all decentralized solutions either, right? Like you have the core of owning and managing your own data and stuff like that. And if it's consent driven, if you're following the right principles, you could potentially use a centralized reputational system if it gives you the benefits that you want, and you have transparency into what's happening.
Yeah, I think it would be quite naive to think that we will have like a full decentralized ecosystem in the end. It will be a combination of centralized components and decentralized components, and obviously something in between, like a hybrid. So we just want we need to make both worlds can coexist simultaneously, and that we build bridges that actually connect them, and then you as an individual or as a company or a public stakeholder, you can choose what solution suits your needs best.
Exactly. Like with the institutions, like you're talking about creating a bridge, where SSI infrastructure could create a bridge between kind of the institution's needs and then being able to partake in this new kind of digital, maybe decentralized economy at times. There needs to be a proper way to mix both together, just knowing that, for example, for a financial institution to do business, they need to do things certain ways because they're regulated to do things certain ways. So data needs to be stored certain ways. They need to do certain types of reporting and have access to certain types of things. So it's just silly, I guess, to think that everything could kind of be disintermediated and decentralized. If there's valuable solutions that happen, and just the way the world works today is that we have nation states that are governing the states. It's just you're going to have to find a way to fit it in there.
Yeah, so this coexistence is super important, and also like to integrate all the different protocols from which are still existing, like SAML, for example, or OpenID Connect. Obviously, these are the bridges which we need to build in order to really connect to the existing world.
There's another tweet that I was curious, just picking your brain on, that you had made, and quote, you say, "It's just a matter of time until the decentralized identity technology will be abused by an authoritarian dictatorship. This, however, won't happen with self-sovereign identity because it's a philosophy and not a technology." Do you mind expanding on that tweet?
Oh yeah, it's this kind of a little bit maybe controversial one, but basically when we take a look into technology, then at some point it's just a tool, right? You can use it however you want. And if you're a government or a party, a stakeholder, which has maybe not the best interest of the people around you, then you can abuse this technology. We see that with a lot of surveillance going on. And then why not use decentralized technology, tweak it a little bit in your favor, that, for example, people cannot choose their own decentralized identifier, but you actually just give them one. and then you can control a lot of aspects within the system if you implement it the way which you wanted to, that you can actually assert control instead of providing control. And this is true for all technologies, right? It's not something special for the stuff we're building. It's certainly true for artificial intelligence, quantum computing, or whatever other hype technology we have right now. And however, that in my opinion, that one happens to self-sovereign identity because it's a way of thinking. It's not a way of implementing technology. It's rather of the way of asking the right questions in terms of how can we protect the individual, how can we ensure that we have trusted relationships between two parties, and that actually we as a society can work together and have interactions and relationships which are really meaningful without actually surveillance, like total surveillance and controlling or every aspect of a citizen's life.
Yeah, I'm aligned to that. I think like with the right foundational standards and norms and principles, and really the focus on that foundational stuff, then after that you're able to build and build with a mindset that, you know, whatever standards, norms, principles, and so forth that you had set, there won't be an opportunity to kind of bypass those. That you're really building everything around that. And so just to close up here, Adrian, the last kind of question or topic I wanted to ask you is just about what excites you the most right now. There's tons of activities happening. You're involved in all sorts of different forums and with different projects. There's tons of use cases coming up and being built around just verified people or verifiable people, around verifiable organizations. There's the whole IoT space, which is something different. Like what excites you the most right now about what's happening in the space?
As you said, there's so much going on, and I could talk like 3 hours, just amazing projects which are happening right now. But for me, it's quite a personal perspective, obviously, and I really enjoy to see that the public and the private stakeholders come together and collaborate, what we see, for example, in Germany, but not only with IDUnion here, but also with a lot of other projects, not only in Europe, but also worldwide, where all the different stakeholders come together. And that's really something really good to see, because then we have really solutions which then get into production, where we have then use cases and so on. And obviously something else which I'm keen on seeing is that we have the first wallets with more than 100,000 users. And I think there will be a really big use case coming up in maybe even this year, so that we really have the big need for the solution, that they say, okay, this is the best solution to approach the problem. And that we see really a huge inflow of people who actually then use the products and components in a real life scenario. And I think that we will see that this year.
Yeah, I think so too. It's definitely coming, and there's so much momentum going in that direction. So we'll end it on that. Adrian, thank you very much for doing this with me today. Much appreciated. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it was really nice, Mathieu.
Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. To stay up to speed with future episode releases, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever channel you're listening to it right now. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me directly. You can find me online. I'm quite active on LinkedIn and Twitter, so I look forward to hearing from you. See you all next time.